The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, a familiar comfort in the small town of Havenwood. Reverend Elijah Jackson hummed a gospel tune as he carefully stacked flyers onto a small table outside the church. Sunlight glinted off the gold lettering announcing the annual Havenwood Harvest Festival and Charity Dinner, an event close to his heart. For years, he poured his energy into this fundraiser, a beacon of hope for the town's less fortunate families. He'd spent weeks organizing volunteers, securing donations, and personally crafting each flyer, his calloused hands carefully folding each piece of paper into a neat rectangle. Reverend Jackson, a man whose smile could melt glaciers and whose presence commanded respect, was a pillar of Havenwood. His sermons were renowned for their warmth and wisdom, his community outreach tireless. He knew every family, every struggle, every aspiration within the town's close-knit boundaries. He wasn't just their spiritual leader. He was their friend, their confidant, their rock. He adjusted his worn, yet impeccably pressed suit, the fabric a testament to his dedication to presenting himself with dignity, even on the simplest of tasks. He glanced at the church, its steeple reaching towards the heavens like a silent prayer. He felt a familiar surge of peace, a quiet confidence in the goodness of his work. Today, he would spread the word, inviting the community to share in the spirit of giving. He began his rounds, walking down Main Street, the familiar rhythm of his footsteps echoing on the pavement. People smiled, waved, and greeted him with warmth. Children, their faces alight with innocent joy, eagerly accepted flyers, their small hands clutching the paper like precious treasures. Shopkeepers paused their work to exchange pleasantries, their voices filled with respect and affection. As he approached the corner bakery, the aroma of freshly baked bread and cinnamon rolls filling the air, he spotted a woman standing near the entrance. She was impeccably dressed, her expensive handbag and tailored coat contrasting sharply with the simple attire of the townsfolk. Her face, however, held an expression of disdain, her lips pursed in a thin line. He approached her with his usual warmth, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, extending a flyer. "We're holding our annual Harvest Festival and Charity Dinner next month. It's a wonderful opportunity to come together and support those in need within our community." The woman, whose name he later learned was Eleanor Vance, didn't even look at him. She snatched the flyer with a dismissive flick of her wrist, her eyes scanning the details with open suspicion. "Another one of your scams, I suppose," she said, her voice sharp and laced with contempt. Her words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the cheerful atmosphere of the street. Reverend Jackson felt a pang of disappointment, but his expression remained unchanged. He had encountered prejudice before, but it never dulled his resolve. "Ma'am, this is a genuine charity event," he replied calmly, his voice gentle yet firm. "All proceeds go directly to assisting families struggling to make ends meet. We have a long history of transparency and accountability." Ms. Vance scoffed, her eyes narrowed. "Don't try to sweet-talk me, Reverend. I've heard the whispers. You're just using religion to line your pockets." Her words were venomous, dripping with prejudice and unwarranted accusation. She turned to leave, her expensive handbag swinging aggressively. Reverend Jackson watched her go, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. He felt no anger, only a deep sadness that such negativity could exist in a community he loved so dearly. He paused for a moment, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, worn leather-bound Bible. He opened it, his eyes falling upon a passage about forgiveness and compassion. He closed his eyes, silently offering a prayer for Ms. Vance, a blessing for her heart and mind. Then, with a renewed sense of purpose, he continued his rounds, his faith unshaken, his spirit undeterred. The sun continued its descent, casting long shadows across the street, but the warmth of his heart remained a constant beacon. The encounter with Ms. Vance lingered in the air like a discordant note in a beautiful melody. Reverend Jackson continued distributing flyers, but the sting of her words remained. He tried to focus on the positive interactions, the smiles and grateful nods from the townsfolk, but the image of Ms. Vance's sneering face kept intruding. He felt a familiar weariness, a weight that came with bearing witness to the ugliness of prejudice. It was a burden he carried often, but one he never allowed to extinguish the flame of his faith. He'd almost reached the edge of town, the flyers nearly depleted, when he saw Ms. Vance again. She was standing by her expensive car, a sleek, black sedan that seemed out of place in the quaint, unassuming town. She was talking on her phone, her voice sharp and agitated, her gestures emphatic. As she ended the call, she saw him approaching. Her face hardened, the earlier suspicion replaced by outright hostility. "You again," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "I thought I made myself clear. I'm not interested in your charitable endeavors." Her tone was laced with a subtle but unmistakable undercurrent of racial bias. Reverend Jackson stopped a few feet away, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her aggression. He didn't flinch, didn't react defensively. He had learned long ago that meeting hate with hate only fueled the flames. Instead, he offered a gentle smile, a gesture of peace in the face of hostility. "Ma'am," he began, his voice even and measured, "I understand your skepticism, but I assure you, this is not a scam. We are a registered charity, and our financial records are open for public scrutiny. Many families in this town rely on the support we provide, and your contribution, however small, would make a significant difference." Ms. Vance's response was not what he expected. Instead of a rational discussion, she launched into a tirade of racist insults, her words laced with prejudice and hatred. She accused him of preying on the vulnerable, of exploiting their faith for personal gain, her voice escalating in volume and intensity. She used derogatory terms, her language laced with the venom of deep-seated bigotry. Reverend Jackson stood his ground, his patience unwavering. He didn't interrupt, didn't raise his voice. He listened, his eyes fixed on hers, his expression a mixture of sadness and understanding. He saw the pain behind the anger, the fear fueling the hatred. He knew that her words were not directed at him alone, but at the very essence of who he was, a black man in a position of authority and respect. It was a reflection of the systemic prejudice that permeated society, a prejudice he had fought against his entire life. When she finally paused, breathless and spent, Reverend Jackson spoke again, his voice soft yet powerful. "Ma'am," he said, "I understand your anger, but I ask you to consider the consequences of your words. Hate only breeds more hate. Fear only perpetuates suffering. Let us instead choose love, choose compassion, choose understanding." He reached out his hand, not in a gesture of confrontation, but of peace. "I offer you a blessing," he said, his voice filled with genuine sincerity. "May God grant you peace, understanding, and the courage to see beyond your prejudices." Ms. Vance stared at him, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. The venom in her eyes seemed to soften slightly, replaced by a flicker of something akin to confusion. She didn't speak, didn't move. She simply stared, her anger slowly dissipating, replaced by a strange, unsettling quiet. Then, without a word, she turned and walked towards her car, leaving Reverend Jackson standing alone on the street, the setting sun casting long shadows around him. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken emotions, a testament to the power of grace in the face of overwhelming hatred. Ms. Vance slid into her car, the leather seats cool against her skin. The engine hummed to life, a stark contrast to the quiet stillness of the evening. She drove away from Havenwood, the town's familiar landscape blurring into a hazy backdrop. But the encounter with Reverend Jackson remained, a persistent echo in the quiet of her car. His calm demeanor, his unwavering kindness, his words of blessing, they were unexpected, unsettling, and strangely compelling. She hadn't intended to confront him again. Her initial outburst had been fueled by a mixture of long-held prejudices and a deep-seated distrust of anything that seemed too good to be true. She'd always been wary of those who seemed overly charitable, associating such acts with hidden agendas or manipulative tactics. Her worldview, shaped by years of ingrained biases and negative experiences, had painted a picture of the world where kindness was a weakness and suspicion a necessity. But Reverend Jackson's response had shattered her preconceived notions. His unwavering composure, his refusal to retaliate, his genuine compassion. These were qualities she hadn't expected, qualities that had shaken her to her core. His words, "Hate only breeds more hate. Fear only perpetuates suffering," resonated within her, a subtle seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of her hardened heart. The drive home was unusually quiet. Usually, the radio blared, filling the silence with the familiar cacophony of news reports and talk shows that reinforced her existing beliefs. But tonight, the silence was deafening, forcing her to confront the unsettling thoughts that had begun to surface. She replayed the encounter in her mind, analyzing every detail, every nuance of his words and actions. She found herself questioning her own assumptions, her own prejudices. Had she been too quick to judge? Had she allowed her ingrained biases to cloud her judgment? The thought was unsettling, a challenge to her established worldview. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, a vulnerability she had long since suppressed. The familiar comfort of her luxurious home failed to soothe her troubled mind. The opulent furnishings, the carefully curated artwork, the meticulously organized spaces, they felt cold and empty, devoid of the warmth and genuine connection she craved. She walked through the rooms, the silence amplifying her inner turmoil. The seed of doubt, planted by Reverend Jackson, had begun to sprout, its tendrils reaching into the deepest recesses of her heart. She found herself recalling snippets of conversations, overheard comments, whispered rumors about Reverend Jackson's work in the community. These were stories she had dismissed as mere fabrications, as attempts to manipulate public opinion. But now, they seemed to take on a new significance, a new weight. The whispers of his kindness, his generosity, his selflessness, they were no longer dismissed as mere propaganda. They were starting to feel real. She remembered the stories of families he'd helped, children he'd supported, elderly people he'd cared for. These weren't just abstract concepts. They were real people with real needs, real struggles, real lives. And Reverend Jackson, with his unwavering faith and boundless compassion, had been there for them, offering support and guidance without judgment or expectation. The doubt gnawed at her, a persistent discomfort that refused to be ignored. She found herself unable to dismiss the possibility that she had been wrong, that her judgment had been clouded by prejudice and unfounded assumptions. The weight of her own biases pressed down on her, a heavy burden she had carried for far too long. The encounter with Reverend Jackson had cracked the facade of her certainty, revealing a vulnerability she hadn't known existed. As she drifted off to sleep, the image of Reverend Jackson's calm face and gentle smile lingered in her mind, a silent testament to the power of grace and the fragility of prejudice. Sleep evaded Ms. Vance. The unsettling encounter with Reverend Jackson, the nagging seeds of doubt planted in her mind, kept her awake, her thoughts swirling like a restless storm. Her usually tranquil bedroom, a sanctuary of comfort and luxury, felt oppressive, the silence amplifying her inner turmoil. She tossed and turned, the plush sheets offering little solace. The opulent surroundings, usually a source of comfort, now felt cold and empty, a stark reflection of the emptiness within her heart. Finally, exhaustion overwhelmed her, pulling her into a fitful sleep. But it wasn't a restful slumber. Instead, she was plunged into a vivid, unsettling dream, a surreal landscape that defied logic and reason. She found herself standing before a radiant presence, a being of pure light and unimaginable power. The light was not harsh or blinding, but warm and comforting, radiating an aura of peace and serenity. Yet it also held an undeniable authority, a sense of profound judgment. The being didn't speak in words, but its presence communicated volumes. Ms. Vance felt a wave of intense scrutiny, a piercing gaze that penetrated her very soul, revealing her innermost thoughts, her hidden prejudices, her deepest fears. She felt exposed, vulnerable, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before this divine presence. She tried to speak, to defend herself, to justify her actions, but the words caught in her throat. The light seemed to anticipate her defenses, its unwavering gaze revealing the hollowness of her justifications. Then the scene shifted. The radiant presence remained, but the landscape transformed. She found herself watching a series of vignettes, fleeting glimpses into the lives of others. Each scene showcased acts of kindness, compassion, and selflessness. She saw Reverend Jackson visiting the sick, comforting the grieving, assisting the needy. She saw him providing food for the hungry, shelter for the homeless, clothing for the destitute. She saw him offering guidance and support to those struggling with addiction, unemployment, and despair. The scenes weren't merely observations. They felt deeply personal, as if she were experiencing them firsthand. She felt the warmth of his compassion, the depth of his empathy, the unwavering strength of his faith. She saw the genuine joy he derived from helping others, the selfless dedication that fueled his tireless work. She saw his unwavering commitment to his community, his unwavering belief in the inherent goodness of humanity. And then, the most unsettling part of the dream unfolded. The scenes shifted to focus on her own family, her relatives whom she had long since distanced herself from. She saw Reverend Jackson visiting her ailing grandmother, offering comfort and support during her final days. She saw him helping her struggling nephew find employment, providing guidance and encouragement when he felt lost and hopeless. She saw him offering a helping hand to her estranged cousin, providing a lifeline during a time of immense personal crisis. These were acts of kindness she had never known about, acts that challenged her preconceived notions about Reverend Jackson and his motives. They revealed a depth of compassion and generosity that she had been blinded by her own prejudices and assumptions. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, the weight of her own ignorance and judgment pressing down on her. The dream ended as abruptly as it had begun. The radiant presence faded, leaving Ms. Vance alone in the darkness, her heart heavy with a profound sense of remorse and regret. She awoke in tears, the vivid images of the dream etched into her memory, the weight of her own prejudices pressing down on her. The seeds of doubt planted by Reverend Jackson had taken root, blossoming into a full-blown realization of her own failings. The encounter hadn't just shaken her preconceived notions. It had shattered them, leaving her with a profound sense of guilt and a desperate need for redemption. The sun hadn't yet risen, but a new dawn was breaking within her, a dawn of self-awareness and a desperate longing for forgiveness. The lingering effects of the dream clung to Ms. Vance like a damp shroud. The radiant presence, the unsettling visions, the weight of her own prejudices, they all coalesced into a profound sense of unease that permeated her waking hours. The luxury of her home, usually a sanctuary of comfort, felt alien and cold. The meticulously organized spaces, the carefully curated artwork, the opulent furnishings, they offered no solace, no escape from the turmoil within her. She tried to dismiss the dream as a mere figment of her imagination, a product of a troubled mind. But the images were too vivid, too real, too emotionally charged to be easily disregarded. The scenes of Reverend Jackson's selfless acts of charity played repeatedly in her mind, each vignette a stark contrast to her own self-centered existence. She recalled the scene where he visited a family whose home had been destroyed by a fire, providing them with temporary shelter, clothing, and food. She saw the gratitude in their eyes, the relief on their faces, the unwavering faith they placed in him. It was a faith she had scorned, a faith she had dismissed as naive and foolish. Now, she saw the tangible results of that faith, the tangible impact of his compassion. Another scene unfolded in her mind. Reverend Jackson counseling a young man struggling with addiction, offering guidance and support without judgment or condemnation. She saw the tears in the young man's eyes, the glimmer of hope that flickered within him. It was a hope that had been rekindled by Reverend Jackson's unwavering belief in his potential, a belief that had transformed a life on the brink of despair. Then came the image of Reverend Jackson visiting the elderly residents of the Havenwood nursing home, reading to them, singing to them, sharing stories and laughter. She saw the warmth in his smile, the genuine affection in his eyes, the respect he showed to those who were often overlooked and forgotten. It was a respect she had failed to show, a respect she had failed to extend to those who were different from her. The scenes continued, each one a testament to Reverend Jackson's unwavering commitment to his community. He helped families struggling to make ends meet, providing them with food, clothing, and financial assistance. He organized community events, bringing people together to celebrate their shared humanity. He offered spiritual guidance and emotional support to those who were hurting, offering a beacon of hope in their darkest hours. Each scene was a powerful indictment of her own prejudices, a stark reminder of her own failings. She had judged him based on her own limited perspective, her own ingrained biases. She had allowed her fears and insecurities to cloud her judgment, preventing her from seeing the good that he did, the positive impact he had on the lives of so many. The dream wasn't just a series of random images. It was a carefully curated narrative, a divine judgment of sorts. It revealed the depth of Reverend Jackson's compassion, the extent of his charitable work, the profound impact he had on the lives of others. It forced her to confront her own shortcomings, her own prejudices, her own lack of empathy. It stripped away her carefully constructed defenses, revealing the vulnerability beneath. It was a humbling experience, a transformative encounter that shook her to her core. The weight of her own judgment pressed down on her, a heavy burden she could no longer ignore. The dream had served its purpose. It had awakened her conscience. The weight of the previous night's dream continued to press upon Ms. Vance. The images of Reverend Jackson's selfless acts, while impactful, were not the most unsettling part. It was the revelation of his kindness towards her own family that truly shook her. The dream hadn't just shown her his good deeds. It had directly connected them to her own blood relatives, people she had, in many cases, neglected or actively distanced herself from. The most vivid scene involved her grandmother, a woman Ms. Vance had barely spoken to in the last decade. Their relationship had been strained, marked by disagreements and misunderstandings. Ms. Vance had always felt a sense of resentment towards her grandmother, believing her to be overly religious and overly sentimental. She had dismissed her grandmother's faith as naive and her concerns as trivial. In the dream, she saw Reverend Jackson visiting her grandmother regularly at the Havenwood nursing home. He wasn't just a visitor. He was a friend, a confidant, a source of comfort during her declining years. He read to her, sang hymns, and shared stories, offering her spiritual guidance and emotional support. He treated her with respect and dignity, a stark contrast to Ms. Vance's own neglect. The scene showed her grandmother's face, radiant with a peace and contentment Ms. Vance had never seen before. It was a profound revelation, a painful reminder of her own failings as a granddaughter. Another scene focused on her nephew, a young man struggling with drug addiction and unemployment. Ms. Vance had distanced herself from him, judging his struggles as a result of his own poor choices. She had offered little support, seeing him as a disappointment and a burden. But in the dream, she saw Reverend Jackson mentoring him, offering guidance and support, helping him find employment and get his life back on track. She witnessed the transformation in her nephew, the renewed hope in his eyes, the gradual return of his self-respect. It was a transformation she had played no part in, a transformation facilitated by the very person she had so readily condemned. A third scene highlighted her estranged cousin, a woman who had fallen on hard times, struggling with financial difficulties and emotional distress. Ms. Vance had always viewed her cousin with a mixture of pity and disdain, believing her struggles to be a result of her own poor choices and lack of ambition. She had offered little help, dismissing her cousin's pleas for assistance as manipulative and undeserving. But in the dream, she saw Reverend Jackson offering her cousin practical and emotional support, helping her find housing, secure employment, and regain her sense of self-worth. She saw the gratitude in her cousin's eyes, the renewed sense of hope that had been ignited by Reverend Jackson's kindness. These scenes weren't just random acts of charity. They were deeply personal, directly impacting her own family members. They revealed a side of Reverend Jackson she had never known, a side that went beyond the public image she had formed. It was a side that demonstrated a depth of compassion, a level of selflessness, and a capacity for forgiveness that challenged her own deeply ingrained prejudices. The dream had not only exposed her own biases, but also revealed the extent to which she had been blind to the good in others, particularly those closest to her. The weight of her own neglect and judgment pressed down on her, a heavy burden of guilt and remorse. The dream had served as a powerful wake-up call, forcing her to confront her own failings and the consequences of her prejudiced judgments. The path ahead was uncertain, but the realization of her own shortcomings had begun to pave the way for a profound change. Ms. Vance awoke with a gasp, her eyes snapping open to the dim light of her bedroom. Tears streamed down her face, hot and heavy, a torrent of remorse washing over her. The dream, vivid and intensely emotional, clung to her like a second skin. The images of Reverend Jackson's selfless acts, particularly those involving her own family, played on a loop in her mind, each scene a painful reminder of her own failings. She had judged him harshly, dismissed his kindness as a facade, attributed his charitable work to ulterior motives. She had allowed her prejudices to cloud her judgment, preventing her from seeing the truth, the genuine compassion that fueled his actions. And now, she knew the truth. She had seen it with her own eyes in the vivid, inescapable reality of her dream. The weight of her guilt was crushing. She had been blind to the good he had done, not only for the wider community, but also for her own family members. She had neglected her grandmother, dismissed her nephew's struggles, and ignored her cousin's pleas for help. Her own actions, fueled by prejudice and self-interest, had contributed to their suffering. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless and shaken. The opulent surroundings of her bedroom, usually a source of comfort and security, offered no solace. The expensive furnishings, the carefully curated artwork, the meticulously organized spaces, they felt cold and empty, a stark reflection of the emptiness within her own heart. She sat up in bed, the plush sheets offering little comfort, her body trembling with a mixture of guilt and self-loathing. The tears continued to flow, a release of pent-up emotions that had been suppressed for far too long. She had lived a life of privilege and comfort, shielded from the realities of poverty and hardship. Her worldview had been shaped by her own experiences, her own biases, her own limited perspective. She had judged others based on her own narrow understanding, failing to see the humanity in those who were different from her. Now, she saw the error of her ways. The dream had served as a powerful catalyst, stripping away her carefully constructed defenses and revealing the vulnerability beneath. It had forced her to confront her own prejudices, her own shortcomings, her own lack of empathy. She had been so quick to judge, so eager to condemn, so unwilling to see the good in others. The remorse was overwhelming, a suffocating weight that threatened to consume her. She felt a deep sense of shame, a profound regret for her actions. She had wronged Reverend Jackson, not only with her words but also with her judgment. She had wronged her family, neglecting their needs and dismissing their struggles. She had wronged herself, allowing her prejudices to define her and limit her capacity for compassion. The sun began to rise, casting a pale light across her bedroom. But the darkness within her remained, a stark contrast to the burgeoning light of a new day. She knew she couldn't continue living with this weight on her soul. She needed to make amends, to seek forgiveness, to find a way to repair the damage she had caused. The path ahead was uncertain, but the first step was clear. She needed to find Reverend Jackson and apologize for her actions. The tears continued to flow, but now they were tears of remorse, tears of regret, tears of a profound and transformative awakening. A new day had dawned, and with it, a new beginning. The weight of her remorse propelled Ms. Vance into action. The guilt, the shame, the regret, they were a constant, gnawing presence, driving her to seek redemption. She couldn't shake the images from her dream, the vivid scenes of Reverend Jackson's kindness, his unwavering compassion, his selfless dedication. She had to make amends, to apologize for her hurtful words and prejudiced judgments. The thought of facing him filled her with a mixture of dread and determination. She spent the morning agonizing over how to approach him. Her usual arrogance, her self-assured demeanor, felt utterly inappropriate. The woman who had so readily condemned him now felt small, insignificant, unworthy of his forgiveness. She considered writing a letter, but the words seemed inadequate, unable to convey the depth of her remorse. A phone call seemed too impersonal, too distant. She needed to see him face to face, to look him in the eyes and express her sincere regret. She spent hours getting ready, her usual meticulous preparation taking on a new significance. She chose her clothes carefully, opting for something simple and unassuming, a stark contrast to her usual extravagant attire. She wanted to present herself humbly, to convey her sincerity and genuine remorse. She avoided her usual makeup, wanting to appear vulnerable, open, and receptive to his judgment. The drive to the church was agonizing. Each mile felt like an eternity, the familiar landscape now seeming alien and unfamiliar. She replayed the encounter in her mind, her own words stinging her like a physical blow. She recalled the venom in her voice, the harshness of her accusations, the blatant prejudice that had fueled her attack. The shame was almost unbearable. As she approached the church, she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. The building, usually a symbol of comfort and peace, now seemed intimidating, a place of potential judgment and rejection. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the car door, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the purpose of her visit, the need for redemption, the desire for forgiveness. She stepped out of the car, the crisp autumn air a welcome contrast to the stifling anxiety within her. She approached the church, her footsteps hesitant, her body trembling slightly. She saw Reverend Jackson standing outside, speaking to a group of people, his voice warm and reassuring. He was smiling, his eyes radiating kindness and compassion. The sight of him filled her with a mixture of hope and fear. She watched him for a few moments, gathering her courage, steeling herself for the inevitable confrontation. She knew that he might not forgive her, that he might reject her apology. But she had to try. She had to take the first step towards redemption. She had to face the consequences of her actions, to accept whatever judgment he might offer. The weight of her guilt was almost unbearable, but it was a weight she was willing to carry, a weight that would propel her forward on this difficult journey. She took another deep breath, her resolve hardening, and began to walk towards him, her heart pounding in her chest, her steps hesitant but determined. The path to redemption was long and arduous, but she was ready to begin. Ms. Vance approached Reverend Jackson, her steps hesitant but determined. The group he was speaking to dispersed as they noticed her approach, their eyes curious, their expressions a mixture of surprise and anticipation. Reverend Jackson, sensing her presence, turned to face her, his smile fading slightly as he recognized her. He didn't look angry, nor did he seem surprised. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes, a sense of anticipation that made her heart sink. She stopped a few feet away, her body trembling slightly. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The weight of her guilt, the burden of her remorse pressed down on her, choking her voice. She felt a lump forming in her throat, her eyes welling up with tears. Reverend Jackson spoke first, his voice calm and gentle, devoid of any hint of judgment or condemnation. "Ms. Vance," he said, his tone soft yet firm, "I've been expecting you." His words were a balm to her wounded soul, a soothing reassurance in the midst of her turmoil. She finally found her voice, her words halting and choked with emotion. "Reverend Jackson," she began, her voice barely a whisper, I came to apologize." The words felt inadequate, insufficient to convey the depth of her remorse. "For what, Miss Vance?" he asked, his eyes fixed on hers, his expression patient and understanding. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush her, giving her the space and time she needed to express her feelings. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself, trying to find the words to express the turmoil within her. "For my words," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "for my accusations, for my prejudice. I was wrong, terribly wrong. I allowed my biases to cloud my judgment, to prevent me from seeing the truth. She continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke from her heart. I judged you harshly, Reverend Jackson. I condemned you without knowing the facts, without understanding the good you do for this community, for my own family. I was blinded by my own prejudices, my own fears, my own insecurities. I am deeply ashamed of my behavior, and I sincerely regret my actions. She paused, her eyes filling with tears again. The weight of her guilt was almost unbearable, but she pressed on, determined to express the full extent of her remorse. I had a dream last night, she said, her voice breaking slightly, a dream that showed me the truth. It showed me the extent of your kindness, your compassion, your selfless dedication. It showed me how wrong I had been, how deeply I had misjudged you, how much I had hurt you with my words. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears, her expression one of genuine contrition. I am truly sorry, Reverend Jackson, she said, her voice choked with emotion. I ask for your forgiveness. Reverend Jackson listened patiently, his expression unwavering. When she finished speaking, he remained silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on hers. Then, with a gentle smile, he extended his hand. Ms. Vance, he said, his voice filled with compassion, your apology is accepted. Forgiveness is not a gift we give lightly, but it is a gift we must offer freely. I believe in the power of redemption, the capacity for change, the possibility of a new beginning. His words were a balm to her wounded soul, a soothing reassurance in the midst of her turmoil. The weight of her guilt began to lift, replaced by a glimmer of hope, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Reverend Jackson's forgiveness was a balm to Ms. Vance's wounded soul. The weight of her guilt, which had been so heavy just moments before, began to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of hope. She had expected anger, rejection, perhaps even condemnation. Instead, she received compassion, understanding, and a second chance. The unexpected grace left her speechless, tears welling up in her eyes once more. He gently squeezed her hand, his touch conveying a warmth and empathy that surprised her. It was a touch that transcended the simple act of physical contact. It was a touch that conveyed acceptance, forgiveness, and a genuine desire for reconciliation. The simple gesture broke down the barriers she had erected around herself, allowing her to feel a vulnerability she hadn't experienced in years. Ms. Vance, Reverend Jackson began, his voice soft and measured. Your words hurt, not just me, but the entire community. Prejudice is a poison that infects us all, blinding us to the inherent worth of each individual. But it is a poison that can be overcome, a poison that can be neutralized with the antidote of understanding and compassion. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. He understood the depth of her remorse, the sincerity of her apology. He knew that her transformation was not merely a superficial change, but a profound shift in perspective, a genuine awakening of conscience. The beauty of our community, he continued, lies not in its uniformity, but in its diversity. We are a tapestry woven from different threads, each thread contributing to the richness and complexity of the whole. To reject one thread is to diminish the beauty of the entire tapestry. To embrace our differences, to celebrate our unique perspectives, is to strengthen the fabric of our community. He spoke about the importance of helping those in need, of sharing one's blessings with others, of recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being. He talked about the power of faith, not as a blind adherence to dogma, but as a guiding principle for living a life of purpose and meaning. He spoke about the importance of forgiveness, not just for others, but also for oneself. He explained how his work wasn't just about providing material assistance. It was about fostering a sense of community, of belonging, of shared humanity. It was about creating a space where everyone felt valued, respected, and loved. He described the joy he derived from helping others, the satisfaction of witnessing their transformation, the profound impact his actions had on their lives. He didn't shy away from the challenges, the hardships, the disappointments. He acknowledged the struggles, the setbacks, the moments of doubt. but he emphasized the importance of perseverance, of unwavering faith, of an unwavering commitment to one's values. He spoke about the transformative power of kindness, the ripple effect of compassion, the profound impact of a single act of generosity. His words were not a lecture, but a conversation, a sharing of wisdom and experience. He spoke from the heart, his voice filled with genuine sincerity and unwavering conviction. He didn't preach, he shared. He didn't judge, he understood. He didn't condemn, he offered hope. His words resonated deeply with Ms. Vance, touching her soul and inspiring a profound sense of gratitude and renewed purpose. She left the church that day not only with a sense of forgiveness, but also with a newfound understanding of the importance of community, the power of compassion, and the transformative potential of a single act of kindness. The path to redemption was still ahead, but she was no longer walking it alone. She had found a guide, a mentor, a friend. Leaving the church, Ms. Vance felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The weight of her guilt had lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and a newfound purpose. Reverend Jackson's forgiveness had been more than just an absolution. It was a catalyst for change, a turning point in her life. The encounter had not only cleansed her conscience, but it also ignited a desire to make amends, to contribute to the very cause she had so readily condemned. The revelation of Reverend Jackson's extensive charitable work, coupled with the dream's poignant depiction of his kindness towards her own family, had profoundly impacted her. She had been blind to his efforts, blinded by her own prejudices and self-centered worldview. Now, she saw the tangible impact of his compassion, the positive change he had brought to the lives of so many, including her own relatives. She felt a deep sense of regret for her past actions, a profound shame for her unwarranted judgment. As she drove home, she replayed Reverend Jackson's words in her mind, his message of community, understanding, and shared humanity resonating deeply within her. His emphasis on the importance of helping those in need struck a chord, igniting a desire to contribute to the cause she had previously dismissed. The upcoming Harvest Festival and Charity Dinner, an event she had initially scorned, now held a new significance. It was an opportunity to make amends, to show her genuine remorse, to actively participate in the very work she had so readily condemned. Upon arriving home, she immediately began making plans. Her usual meticulous organization, previously directed towards personal gain and self-indulgence, was now channeled towards a different purpose. She contacted several of her business associates, people she had previously relied upon for personal gain, seeking their support for Reverend Jackson's charity event. She offered substantial financial contributions, far exceeding anything she had ever donated before. She also reached out to her network of influential contacts, people she had previously used to further her own ambitions. She leveraged her connections to secure sponsorships and donations for the event, using her resources to amplify Reverend Jackson's efforts. She contacted local businesses, offering them opportunities to showcase their products and services at the festival, in return for their support of the charity. Her approach was markedly different from her previous interactions. Instead of demanding favors and exploiting connections, she offered collaborations, partnerships, and genuine support. Her tone was humble, her demeanor respectful, her intention sincere. She was no longer driven by self-interest, but by a desire to contribute to a greater cause, to make amends for her past mistakes. The transformation in Ms. Vance was remarkable. The woman who had once dismissed Reverend Jackson's work as a scam was now actively involved in promoting and supporting it. The woman who had once spewed hateful words was now using her influence to spread kindness and compassion. The woman who had once been driven by self-interest was now dedicated to serving her community. Her actions spoke louder than words, a testament to the transformative power of forgiveness and the profound impact of a single act of grace. She was embarking on a new beginning, a journey of redemption that would redefine her life and her relationship with the community she had once so readily condemned. The Harvest Festival was no longer just a charity event. It was a symbol of her transformation, a testament to the power of second chances, and a celebration of a newfound purpose. The Havenwood Harvest Festival and Charity Dinner was a resounding success. The town square buzzed with activity, a vibrant tapestry of people from all walks of life coming together to celebrate community and shared humanity. Children played games, families shared meals, and laughter filled the air. The atmosphere was one of joy, unity, and shared purpose, a testament to the power of collective effort and the transformative impact of forgiveness. Ms. Vance was at the heart of it all, actively participating in every aspect of the event. She wasn't just a donor. She was a volunteer, working alongside Reverend Jackson and other community members to ensure the smooth running of the festival. She greeted guests, assisted with food service, helped organize activities, and offered support wherever needed. Her transformation was complete. The woman who had once scorned the event was now its most dedicated supporter. Her presence surprised many, but her genuine enthusiasm and unwavering commitment quickly won over any lingering skepticism. She worked tirelessly, her energy and efficiency a testament to her newfound purpose. She interacted with people from all backgrounds, engaging in conversations, offering assistance, and demonstrating a genuine interest in their well-being. Her interactions were marked by humility, respect, and a genuine desire to connect with others. She spent hours helping to serve food, her elegant hands now adept at handling trays and utensils. She interacted with families struggling to make ends meet, offering words of encouragement and support, her empathy evident in her gentle touch and compassionate gaze. She helped children with their games, her laughter mingling with their joyous squeals. She engaged with elderly residents, offering companionship and conversation, her genuine interest in their stories evident in her attentive listening. Her interactions were a stark contrast to her previous behavior. The woman who had once dismissed others with disdain now treated everyone with respect and kindness. The woman who had once judged others based on their appearance and background now saw the inherent worth in every individual. The woman who had once been driven by self-interest was now dedicated to serving others. Her contribution went far beyond her financial donations. She used her business acumen to streamline operations, her organizational skills to improve efficiency, and her communication skills to enhance outreach. She worked seamlessly with Reverend Jackson and the other volunteers, her leadership and guidance proving invaluable. She became an integral part of the team, a valuable asset to the cause. The success of the event was a testament to the power of collective effort, the strength of community, and the transformative impact of forgiveness. It was a symbol of unity, a celebration of shared humanity, and a beacon of hope for the future. Ms. Vance's transformation, from a prejudiced critic to a dedicated supporter, was a powerful reminder of the potential for change, the capacity for redemption, and the enduring power of grace. The event concluded with a sense of accomplishment, a feeling of shared purpose, and a renewed commitment to serving the community. Ms. Vance, standing alongside Reverend Jackson, felt a profound sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of peace she had never known before. Her journey of redemption was far from over, but she was finally walking the path towards a life of meaning, service, and genuine connection.